That was to be a great tribulation. Not some 7-year tribulation, but great tribulation. And not the great tribulation, just great tribulation that is to take place. He said in Matthew 24:35. And again, for me, this should be all I need to read to understand that it has already passed. Before he says, assuredly, I say unto you that this generation will by no means pass away until all these things take place. Now, this is going to get a little tricky here, because we know any Bible expositor that you know, if you don't believe me, any Bible expositor can tell you that a generation was approximately 40 to 45 years in length under the old Israelite economy. A generation was typically 40 years. You go back and you look at the genealogies and you will see that a generation lasts 40 years. Jesus Christ came to earth, began his ministry at 30 years old. At 30 years old. AD 70 came exactly 40 years later. One generation. Jesus said that the generation that he was in would not pass until this tribulation has taken place. Now, you have this school of thought, dispensational eschatology, who in great, tremendous error maintain that somehow there is a gap between the 69th and the 70th week of Daniel's prophecy of Daniel 9. They say that the final week has a gap between it, which so far has been over 2,000, almost 3,000 years. If that were true, then what Jesus said right here in Matthew 24, verse 34, when he says, I say unto you that this generation will not pass till this great tribulation has taken place, there's a disconnect. There would be a disconnect. There is no possible way that the tribulation could be future if Jesus said that it would not, that generation that he was then speaking to would not pass until it was fulfilled. This is just common sense reading through the scriptures. This isn't even one of those mysterious mysteries that we have to figure out how to expound, and that generations of people and decades of people need to add more detail in order to bring the truth into its fullest. This isn't one of those instances. So Jesus says that generation that then wouldn't pass. The generation was about 40 years. 40 years after Christ's ministry was AD 70. And the tribulation of those days did take place. It did take place. So, my friends on the dispensational eschatology school of biblical interpretation have a lot that they need to answer for. Because their interpretation is absolutely 100% false. And misleading as it is, it has taken and carried away many souls along with that faulty teaching. Completely false. Completely false. And for any Christian who spends time in the Word of God can easily refute every one of those notions that they present. You need to understand the significance of what was destroyed in AD 70 and how it was destroyed. it says that many people, that Jesus said, many will come on my name saying, I am Christ, and will deceive many. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars, and nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines, pestilences, earthquakes in various places. And he says that these are just the beginning of the sorrows. The beginning of sorrows. And then down in verse 15, he says, therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, whosoever reads, let him understand. And then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let him who is on the housetop not go down and take anything out of his house. Let him who is in the field not go back to get his clothes. But woe unto those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing babies in those days. And pray that your flight may not be in the winter or on the Sabbath, for then there shall be great tribulation, such as has not been since the beginning of the world until this time, nor ever shall be. Now, notice Christ tells them that when they see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing where it ought not to be, he says, let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. He tells them to flee. When you see the abomination of desolation standing where it does not belong, run for the hills, is what he says. Get out of town. Get out of Dodge. Get to stepping. Move. Depart. Leave. Now, if the abomination of desolation was already standing where it ought to, or where it should not be, how could they leave if he's already there? I'm going to give you the reason why. I'm going to tell you how they were able to leave after the abomination of desolation was standing where it was not, where he was not supposed to be. The abomination of desolation was the captain of the Roman guard. And at that time, it was Vespasian. Vespasian was the father of Titus. When Vespasian received the order to come and destroy Jerusalem, he was recalled back to Rome. And when he was recalled back to Rome, that was their opportunity to flee. And when he went back to Rome, it is then that he would then send his son, Titus, to come in his place. So they had a brief window where they could flee, where they could run. It would be when Vespasian left, then Titus would come. This was how they were supposed to know. When Vespasian got there, they were supposed to know it's time to go. Time to go. Now, so then Titus comes in. Titus comes in and he levels Israel to the ground. He destroys the temple. He burns everything. He kills somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 million plus of the Israelites of that day. All of Israel became dispersed. The destruction and the blood was massive. It is described, so much blood, it is described, if you go back and look at the wars of Josephus, it says that the blood came to the horse's bridle. Keep in mind, there was no sewage system. It was a bloodbath. They destroyed the temple.